Donald Trump is rushing to sell Ukraine to Putin as soon as possible, and he doesn't care what concessions Kyiv has to make as long as a peace deal is reached as quickly as possible. This opinion was expressed today by former Donald Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton, who understands Trump's policies better than anyone else. He insists that the haste and inconsistency of the United States administration in its attempts to end the war in Ukraine indicate Trump's attempt to reach a peace agreement, at any cost and with any postponed consequences. The main thing is the chance to present himself as a peacemaker now. But that's not the main point. Trump doesn't care about the consequences of his peace plan, as he's more focused on starting business with the Russians, even at the expense of occupied Ukrainians. Bolton also shared details about Steve Vitkov's openly pro-Russian actions. Vitkov no longer hides his service to the Kremlin, focusing mainly on making business deals and showing no concern for the consequences. In general, Bolton shared a lot of interesting things about how Trump is blatantly selling out Ukraine. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any. Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link to it is in the description of this video. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. So, former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, John Bolton, published a major opinion column in The Telegraph. Bolton writes that by Thanksgiving, November 27, Washington's Ukraine policy was already chaotic. And then things got even worse. A leaked phone call apparently showed that Steve Vitkov, a friend and envoy of Donald Trump, was essentially selling Ukraine to the Russians, giving advice to Yuri Ushakov, Vladimir Putin's foreign policy advisor, how to flatter President Trump. Then a quote from Bolton. Moreover, Trump seems to have acknowledged this. I met with Ushakov when he was Moscow's ambassador in Washington during the presidency of George W. Bush. I worked with him then and during Trump's first term. The transcript strikes me as genuine. By the weekend, Volodymyr Zelensky had little good news to celebrate, except for the disappearance of the Thanksgiving deadline, originally set by Trump for accepting his peace plan. What prompted this latest attempt to reach a Russian-Ukrainian agreement remained a mystery, as well as who was actually acting as America's chief diplomat and what the ultimate goals were. And then Bolton directly says that it is incomprehensible how typical it is for Trump to lack a consistent national security strategy, whether from the perspective of America or Ukraine. Negotiations are conducted in a chaotic and asymmetrical manner, without regard for actual facts. The main question, are the issues still unclear or unresolved? For example, the territorial and security guarantee issues are the main questions of this war. They're unresolved, but Trump is nearly declaring victory. Unrealistic deadlines and, like used car salesmen, endless cheerful talk about a quick deal. That was from Starter Bolton. So Bolton directly says that this chaos in decision-making has always been present with Trump. And then they write that firstly, from the conversation between Vitkov and Ushakov, one can conclude that the latest chaos was provoked specifically by Vitkov, who optimistically told Ushakov about it, after the recent agreement on the Gaza Strip regarding the release of the remaining Israeli hostages. Bolton makes an important remark here. I would say, finally, someone from the highest levels of American power has said this out loud. Quote, today, of course, this agreement on Gaza is at a critical level, and there is no evidence that Hamas intends to stop its armed struggle with Israel and disarm, which is an essential condition for any progress beyond the release of hostages. Bolton is directly saying that although a peace agreement was supposedly reached, the plan hasn't worked yet. And so far, no one wants to admit that the declared peace in the Gaza Strip has actually not come, and Hamas still exists, no one has disarmed them, and Iran is once again threatening Israel with a new war. But the peace plan was signed, and Trump announced it to the whole world, and now, moving on. Bolton says that right after the conversation with Putin's aide Ushakov, Vitkov basically faked a phone call between Putin and Trump to make sure that his efforts had helped. or will help disrupt the Trump and Zelensky-Magavk missile deal in the future. And Bolton honestly says that Vitkov's actions are not ordinary honest mediation, it's simply a pro-Russian policy by an American official. Secondly, Bolton says Trump was clearly trying to present the deal to Zelensky as a take-it-or-leave-it offer. He could either surrender or, as Trump politely put it, keep fighting as hard as he could. It is reported that United States Army Secretary Dan Driscoll warned that Ukraine is in a difficult military situation. How did it get to the point where Kyiv was told about inevitable defeat, something that had never happened before in a United States assessment? So Ukraine's top ally is basically saying you'll lose tomorrow, so it's time to surrender. Again, this is their main ally. It's simply incomprehensible. Marco Rubio's later efforts to restore balance in Geneva were only partly successful. Since the most difficult issues, such as territorial division, are still being discussed by Trump, Zelensky, and Putin, and here comes the most crucial quote from Bolton. Thirdly, Trump's only goal is to make a deal, any deal. Vitkov suggested Ushakov tell Putin to inform Trump that, as with Gaza, the negotiators discussed a similar 20-point peace plan. Vitkov added that the president would give me enough space and authority to reach an agreement. The situation in the Gaza Strip is clearly very different from that in Ukraine. Vitkov's description. Trump's way of thinking confirms that he has no significant political red lines. His real goal is the Nobel Peace Prize. He may be concerned that the rules of the Nobel Committee require him to be nominated for an agreement with Ukraine by January 31. That's why there's such a rush before Thanksgiving. Accordingly, for some strange reason, the West once again has to make sure that another diplomatic intervention by Trump doesn't benefit the Kremlin. To succeed, Ukraine's friends must finally recognize that Trump doesn't care at all how any settlement will affect Ukraine. He's only concerned about how it will affect himself. Well, here it is. Bolton's words are confirmed by the fact that United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the White House will not consider security guarantees for Ukraine until a peace agreement is reached. For Trump, this makes sense, since he cares about the present, not some distant prospect like 3 years from now when he will no longer be president. However, for Ukraine, any peace agreement without solid security guarantees is not just hopelessly incomplete, but also poses an existential threat. Because, listen, we agreed to end the war without any security guarantees at all. But Trump is being pressured and told, listen, first the peace plan, agree to all the conditions we dictate to you just to satisfy Donald Trump's ego. The issue of security guarantees will be addressed later. If Trump leaves in 3 years, it may no longer be relevant. And here Bolton points out another important point, quote, not Ukraine or supposedly NATO. Worse yet, Trump's deference to Putin on the Ukraine issue in real time is reflected in Trump's deference to Xi Jinping on the Taiwan issue. It is reported that during a 1-hour phone conversation on November 25, Xi Jinping angrily complained to Trump about a statement made by Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, regarding Taiwan. Xi Jinping demanded that Takaichi retract her statements that Chinese military action against Taiwan could provoke a corresponding response from Japan. On the same day, Trump immediately called Takaichi, and reportedly Trump at least asked her to refrain from making public statements about Taiwan. Japanese observers believe that Trump's warning to America's closest ally in East Asia is driven by his desire to maintain fragile trade relations with China and to facilitate the conclusion of the largest trade deal in history. Europeans and Americans, who are concerned about collective security rather than Trump's personal priorities, should be at least equally concerned, but there is hope. In the past month, there have been signs that Donald Trump's electorate may be falling apart and his influence on the Republican Party is weakening. Republican criticism of his policy on Ukraine is growing, indicating that Trump is irreversibly sliding into lame duck status. To Zelensky in winter, the leaders of NATO countries and sensible Americans should remember the bold response of United States Navy Commander John Paul Jones when he told the British at the Battle of Flamborough Head, "I have not yet begun to fight." So I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.